Hello and welcome to Stuart Saturday Live, Season 3, Episode 6. I'm your hostess, Andrea Zuvich, 17th Century Lady. I'm coming to you live from Bolsover, Derbyshire, England. I'd like to begin by thanking last month's guest, Dr. Jérémy Fillet. During that chat, we spoke about late Stuart exiles and the Grand Tour, and we focused on Lorraine, France, and Ireland. And today we will be turning our attentions to 17th century Germany and on the life of Sophia Dorothea of Celle, a woman who had a scandalous and ultimately tragic life. From an arranged marriage to an illicit romance with fatal consequences, this is a story that has inspired film, novels, and historical work. Our guest today is Catherine Curzon, a historian specializing in the 18th century, vintage cinema, and vintage fashion, whose work has been featured online by BBC News, BBC History Extra, The Daily Express, and in publications including All About History, Who Do You Think You Are?, Vanity Fair, and the Smithsonian Magazine, among others. With her 2020 biography, The Imprisoned Princess, The Scandalous Life of Sophia Dorothea of Celle, published by Pen and Sword History, we're given insight into the life of one of the most tragic heroines, or the tragic histories of late 17th and early 18th century royal women. Joining us live from atop a steep hill in West Yorkshire, England, to chat about Sophia Dorothea, please welcome Catherine Curzon. Hello, Catherine. Hi,
Yeah.
welcome. Oh, it's so lovely to have you in my salon today. Well, we've known each other for what, 15
A
years now or
long
so? A long
time.
time. Yes. Oh yeah, we've met a few times, ladies and gentlemen, and yeah, we got on very well. And remember, we were starting off with our historical pursuits, and you've just taken off. You're just amazing. All the things you've achieved within the past 15 years is extraordinary, and I'm so happy for you. Um, and I remember one of the meetings we had. We were at a pub in Windsor, and that was fun.
Yeah, it was.
um, yeah, I think it was called the Carpenter's Arms or something, but
It was.
it was yeah. Oh, it was great. And then I think uh, I and several other history friends, we I think trundled around to I think the Welcome Center. Was that what it was?
We did, and I think National Gallery.
Yes, I think we did.
d- We did because I remember spotting a portrait of Lord Broome and sort of going Broome, flying across the gallery towards it. Broome. Yeah. Oh, that
Yes.
was wonderful. That was really,
Yeah.
really good memories. Like
Fantastic.
historian groupiness.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's the best kind of outing, I think.
Oh, it is.
Um,
And it's,
yeah.
I just think
So
that's such a massive honor to be invited on here. It's just
yeah.
fantastic.
Well, it's an honor to have you, definitely. All right. So today is very different for us. I mean, we're branching out, going away from Stuart Britain, just as it is on the islands. But we are going to think about the Georgian period. And when we think about the Georgian period, many people tend to consider how much was going on in the 17th century during the Stuart period, which preceded it. Um, as was discussed in the previous episode with Dr. Fillet, there were many connections between Stuart Britain and various courts in Europe, at the very least. But before we get into Sophia Dorothea's extraordinary life story, um, maybe we could spend some time on 17th century Germany in itself. Um, what was the context of what we call Germany at that time?
Well, Germany, as we know it now, obviously has
Mm,
a very storied history of division and reunification.
mm,
And I think we think of that as being a relatively recent thing, but Germany in the 17th century was even more divided than we've known it in the 20th century. So it was actually a very loose connection of hundreds and hundreds of tiny principalities and duchies and major cities, with their own rulers, their own laws, their own weird little peccadillos. And it was essentially at the mercy of an increasingly fractious Holy Roman Empire. And as the
Mhm.
century went on, the rattling of Habsburg sabers at the borders got louder and louder. And it was also incredibly divided down religious lines,
Mm.
as we know, because that obviously comes into play in George the First's life,
Yeah,
and also very strict hierarchies, feudal systems, quite old school, I think, in many regards.
I
Um,
see.
and it's from these little principalities and little duchies that we start to see this story emerge, because there was a small number of these little areas that became electorates of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, these were in the hierarchy of Germany at the time. The electorates were kind of top of the tree, and the rulers of them, the electors, were the people who voted for the Holy Roman Emperor. So, for you to go from being a duke to an elector was an enormous leap. It was a leap of money, territory, power, everything you can think of. And in Hanover, where we're going to find ourselves, this is where we find the story beginning. We find George the First as he became his father, very ambitious man, and we see the birth of the Electorate of Hanover, which obviously is long since forgotten now, but it really
Right.
was a time of change and ambition, and this is a story full of ambition.
Indeed. Um, yes, you mentioned George. So
Mm.
I think it's what it's Georg Ludwig or
Yes,
something
yeah.
in German. Um, well, who was he? And can you explain about his parents and why he's such an important figure for us, please?
So George was the eldest son of Ernest Augustus, who became the Elector of Hanover. So we
Mm.
refer to him as the Elector because he had lots and lots of titles. And his wife, Electress Sophia, who is one of my favourite historical women,
Right, and
she,
you've written a
I
biography of
have,
her,
yes.
right?
It was amazing because when I came to look at that biography, she was
Mhm.
completely unrepresented. There was very little of her. There was a couple of biographies that from back in the 18th century. So, you know, the kind of puff piece
Mm.
biographies that we've all read as
Yeah.
young. We have her diaries, which were annotated wonderfully in a recent edition, but unfortunately, she stopped writing them. And she was the granddaughter of King James the First, so she was a woman who was very secure in her place in the world. So she'd
Hmm.
grown up actually without a whole lot of money, thanks again to these, territorial disputes in Europe. And she was determined once she got married that that wasn't going to happen to her. Now, I'm going to sort of like double back on some of this.
Hmm.
But George only comes about because of a weird little bit of an arrangement between two brothers. So there was Ernest Augustus, and he had
Hmm.
three brothers, and they split the family land between them, which you can imagine is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And Sophia was actually due to marry his brother, who we're going to come on to later. He didn't want to
Okay.
get married. That's George William. Ernest
Hmm.
Augustus wanted to be in charge. George William wanted to be rich and have fun. So when the other two brothers died, George William said to Ernest Augustus, "Look, do you want to take Sophia off my hands? And I won't marry her." And Ernest Augustus said, "Yeah, that's fine. And in return for that, I'll take the management position, if you like. So I'll become the heir to the power. I'll take wife,
Hmm.
and you take the Duchy of Celle, which is quite a nice duchy, nice bit of money. And then when you
Hmm.
die, I'll inherit the lot." And we'll come to something of that later. But that was the arrangement. So Sophia and Ernest Augustus only got together because her husband's brother didn't want to get married. And they had George. Now, you'll know, of course, that Sophia was also, thanks to the Act of Settlement, eventually heiress presumptive to our throne in Great Britain.
Yes.
And she
Yeah.
missed out on becoming the queen by a matter of weeks.
Yes, it's an extraordinary
Yes,
story, isn't it?
yes.
Yes.
So that's hence the subtitle, "The Finest Queen Britain Never Had," because she was all good to go. She was waiting it out, and she collapsed in her garden, I think
Oof.
about 3 weeks before she would have succeeded to the throne. So it's quite a story in itself.
Yeah. It really is. And so, if people want to know more about her story, definitely read Catherine's book. um, so, um, George later on, he was, I think it was 1682, 83.
Yeah.
Not, yeah, he was seriously considered as a potential husband for
Mm.
Princess Anne, who later became queen. But the two met and they just didn't get on. I mean, what happened there? And do we know why they didn't hit it off?
We don't know officially, but lots of people didn't get on with George. So they were second cousins, and George was shipped over to Great Britain to
Mhm.
hopefully, as you say, hopefully romance Princess Anne. And George, the one thing that keeps coming up throughout George's life is that when he met women, he was kind of shrug, just didn't care. But he eventually ended up with a mistress who was the equivalent of George, but a woman. What George wanted to do was hunt. That was all George wanted to do. So we met Princess Anne, and what we do know, gossip has it, is that she just didn't like him. She thought he was dull. And this is something that does keep coming up in reports of George, that George was quite dull.
Right.
So Princess Anne and her father both actually thought that the Hanoverians were not a good match, that they were
Mm.
pretty low level at this point. They didn't have a lot of power. They didn't have a lot of anything. And there was also obviously always the slight potential for issue with the two brothers if one decided to go back
Mm.
on his word. But
Right.
Princess Anne just thought George was too dull for words. And
Yeah.
George responded with, as he always did, I once described it as a shrug in human form. He shrugged and went, and just went
Oh
back to
dear.
Germany. So it's interesting because it's one of those things, especially your era and mine really meet here, where the
Yeah,
whole history of this country could change if
it's
George had
amazing.
been left dull.
Yeah, and funnily enough, he was a bit of a shrug, right? This George,
Yeah.
but Anne ended up marrying another George, George of Denmark, who was almost considered to have the same sort of reputation of being not really uh, how's a
Not very
charitable way of
dynamic.
saying it? Not very dynamic. Yes. Yeah, I don't always believe that Charles II said that he tried him drunk and sober and there's nothing in him. I think it's a little unkind perhaps. Um, but yes, it is extraordinary how things work
Mm.
out, and I think I'll mention more about that later. Um, but George returned, shrugging, to Germany without a marital alliance with his Stuart cousins. So, how did his marriage to Sophia Dorothea come about? I
So
mean,
this is
who
where
was
we
she?
go back to those two brothers. So Ernest
Yes.
Augustus and George William. So
Hmm.
George William hands over his fiancée
Oh dear.
and hands over his share of the power in return for a duchy that will keep him well off, keep him in women, and mean that basically he just gets to wear those flamboyant wigs and have a great time. Um, so everything seems like it's going fine. Now, one of the things he absolutely gave his word was that he would never marry. He could do anything he wanted, but he couldn't marry. The reason for this, if he had a son, that son would have a legitimate right to challenge Ernest Augustus for some
Mm.
control. So daughters were fine, but you obviously can't guarantee that you won't have a son. So no
Mm.
legal marriage means no legal heir.
Right.
So he gets rid of Sophia, who said in her memoirs, the only love I felt was for a good establishment, and I had no trouble trading the older brother for the younger, so she didn't care. So George William went off, met all his girls, had lots of fun. We do know that he had quite a lot of issues with things like sexually transmitted diseases. He was
Oh
very much like
dear.
the party brother.
Right.
And then he met a woman called Eleanor Desmier Dolbrus. Excuse my pronunciation. And she was Huguenot noble, a very, very low noble. And
Okay.
her father was a bit of an adventurer, and he had decided that he needed to get, as we'll see with another woman later, to get his daughter a position. So she moved through various courts as ladies in waiting. and she was at Celle when she met George William. And George William was smitten. So we know she was incredibly glamorous and incredibly good fun. She was very dynamic and very effervescent. And
Right.
George William inveigled her job as Sophia's lady in waiting.
Oh.
So Sophia, so he could keep her close, but Sophia thought she had airs, and that irked Sophia. So Sophia made her sit at the table with the servants, and at one occasion she went to sit at the high table, and Sophia sort of clicked her fingers and waved her off. So there was a lot of argy-bargy between the wife of one brother and the girlfriend of another. So eventually they had a daughter, and that daughter was Sophia Dorothea. He then broke his promise and married Eleanor.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
The only thing in his favour at this point is that he acknowledged it was a morganatic marriage, so therefore it wasn't going to be recognised. It was a marriage, if you like, to keep Eleanor happy. But Eleanor was not happy. So she brings up her little girl, Sophia Dorothea. Sophia Dorothea is very much the pampered and adored daughter. So we know that the mother and daughter used to go out riding in their carriage around Celle, and people got incredibly, it was like a celebrity thing, you know, that you spotted them, people were incredibly excited to see them. Sophia Dorothea would sit doing a little royal wave in the window.
Oh, that's cute.
It is very cute, but the more Eleanor looked at her daughter and the more she looked at the coffers of Celle that were very well off, it was a good territory, she started to worry about what would happen to her daughter, because obviously there's only one child, but she's not officially official.
Right.
So Eleanor starts niggling at George William, and George William is one of those men who is, likes to bestow largesse. And he decided the best largesse he could bestow on Eleanor was to legitimize the marriage. So suddenly, word has been broken. The marriage is legitimized, it's recognized by church, by state, by everybody. And Sophia, his sister-in-law, very famously wrote to her niece and said, "We shall now have to say Madame la Duchesse to this little clot of dirt." So that's how she regarded Eleanor. So Eleanor has gone from being the servant to being not her equal, but not far below now. She's a duchess too. She is a clot of dirt.
That's such a horrible thing to say.
It is, and Eleanor, Sophia's memoirs and letters are full of this sort of thing. We're going to hear some more of it. She had quite a foul mouth, to be honest, but she liked to swear. Let's put it that way. And for a lady who in her portraits was very classy, she was a bit of a scrapper. I think she had to be, but she I hate to say it, but she could be just really bitchy.
Right.
But it was a completely different setup. So Hanover, we have Sophia, Ernest Augustus, and young George is very protocol driven. It's very stuffy and formal. And over in Celle, party central. And as Sophia Dorothea grows up, Eleanor tells her all the time, "Oh, Hanover's terrible. Those people in Hanover, they're so boring. George is such an oaf." Because she never for a moment thinks there's going to be a marriage here. So Sophia Dorothea is eventually matched to the son of Duke Anthony Ulrich of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel.
Oh,
and
that's
all
short name. Yeah.
it's going to go incredibly well, but unfortunately her fiance caught a cannonball. So that's the end of that. And at this point, Sophia over in Hanover says they've got a lot of money in Celle. And Sophia Dorothea is nearly 16. And now there's somebody who needs a wife.
Right.
So she hopped in her carriage. Now, the one thing that she knew is that since George William gave her up to his brother, George William has become virtually obsessed with her ever since. So he would always send letters and he wanted to dance with her. So once he didn't have her, he wanted her back. So she decided to leverage this. So we know she leaves Hanover at about 4:00 in the morning on Sophia Dorothea's 16th birthday, and she arrives in Celle with the dawn. She went in. This is where we say she is a force of nature, Sophia. She stormed into the house, up the stairs, gets him out of bed, leaving Eleanor in bed, and said, "We're going to have a private conversation." Took him into another room where they conversed in, I think it was Dutch, I forget. They conversed in a language that Eleanor didn't speak.
Oh, right.
And by the time the meeting ended, Sophia had brokered the marriage between George William's daughter, Sophia Dorothea, and her son, George.
Oh.
So this means that she secures all of the wealth of Celle will come back into Hanover. The titles, the duchies, the power, everything that is currently in the hands of one day Sophia Dorothea as the only heiress in Celle comes to Hanover.
Right.
And poor Sophia Dorothea doesn't know this is going to happen. George William goes and tells Eleanor what's happened, and Eleanor is horrified. But she sort of sees it as many people watching this will know, it's one of those things of it's your duty. And Eleanor goes to tell Sophia Dorothea, and one of the most famous stories in Georgian history, she has with her a little portrait, little miniature, jeweled miniature of George. She shows it to Sophia Dorothea, who flings it across the room and famously says, "I will not marry that pig snout."
Ooh. Oh my.
Yes. Ooh. And all we know though is she has no choice, as you'll know from many stories in the Stuart era. She has no choice. She is going to marry the pig snout. And Eleanor, despite her own misgivings, just has to sit and comfort her till she accepts it's going to happen.
Wow. Oh, so it's already started on the wrong foot.
Yes.
That's quite sad. But we have a portrait of Sophia Dorothea, and as she was older, and I tried to do my hair like her in this portrait, if we can get it up. But by the way, some in our audience probably follow you on social media, where your handle is Madame Gilles Fleur.
Yes.
And your hashtag frocking fabulous.
Yes.
You cover loads of fashion, including gorgeous frocks. And this week's selection was an homage to Margot Ledbetter, played by the late Penelope Keith from The Good Life. With your fashion hat on, how stylish was Sophia Dorothea?
Oh, incredibly. So even as a child, there was a lot of conversation about this beautiful young girl, a beautiful princess, and she was known, and we'll come to it later, that even when things went horribly wrong for her, she was known for reports of her fashion. Sorry, I've just put the light on, it's suddenly going incredibly dark. Her fashion, her hair, and you look phenomenal. And I'm going to say, as I said to you, there's quite a few portraits where she really looks like you.
Oh, thank you. Well,
yes, she was an absolute icon. So this is hugely complimentary to both of you. She was an absolute icon.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yeah, she dressed, so she was kind of a breath of fresh air in this stuffy Hanoverian court, where, as we'll find out shortly, there was a lot of heavy fabrics, thick makeup, and then this beautiful young woman arrives. She's effervescent, she loves to dance, she loves to party, she's cultured. And sadly, as we've seen quite often through history, that she arrived with all of that, but unfortunately, status quo kind of squishes that out of you.
Right. Oh, wow. So this unfortunately arranged couple married, and they did have children together. We are looking at the standard unhappy arranged marriage, aren't we? I mean, it didn't really go well after their marriage. Just got worse and worse, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Things got worse. They managed to have 2 children. So they did manage that. They had George, future George II, and Sophia
and I think that's him. He's on there's a portrait there.
Little Sophia Dorothea there.
Yeah.
So this was one of the complications with this book. There were lots of Georges and Sophia Dorotheas.
Yes, but I like how you handled it, because when you're talking about the Empress Sophia, you say Sophia, and when you're talking about Sophia Dorothea, you do say Sophia Dorothea. So there can be no ambiguity about that. So it's good. But yes, there's like, which one are you talking about otherwise?
But yeah, so
any Georges.
George was not, I'm going to say, he's not a good husband. Not a good husband. He neglected his wife. He went hunting. He just did everything he could to not be present. And I think what George expected from his marriage was that he would have a wife and she
Mm-hmm.
would just. So his mother was very shrewd and held a
Mm.
lot of power, but she knew how to play the game because of her upbringing. She'd watched her mother have to sort of hustle, and she'd learned when you put yourself forward, when you hold yourself back. Whereas Sophia Dorothea had come from being the apple of a very flamboyant mother's eye and a very
Mm-hmm.
indulgent father, and had
Okay.
never been taught that. And she expected, I think, to kind of land in Hanover and make the best of it. But what she got was a man who accepted he had to be married, he accepted he had to produce an heir, and beyond that, he didn't want to be bothered with her.
Mm.
Later on, there were incidents, quite serious incidents of abuse from George. So there was an occasion where he tried to strangle her and had to be dragged off of her.
Oh dear.
She actually fled that, and Sophia, his mother, had to go and bring her back and did, read to her son the riot act.
Mm.
But the issue we have with George is that his own mother called him a pig-headed, stubborn boy.
Wow.
And she said to her, you're getting a fortune. He received a huge amount of money in Sophia Dorothea's dowry. She became the heiress to everything, but it didn't make him happy.
Mm.
And George had a mistress, and we're going to come to all of this later on. But
Right.
George's mistress was the sister of Ernest Augustus's mistress, and she was an incredibly powerful woman, and she was a
Mm.
key player in what's going to unfold here.
Right.
And she was Clara von Platen, who was the wife of the prime minister in Hanover.
Uh-huh.
She had a lot more power than her husband, but she did understand how to exercise power and how to do it in a way where you didn't appear to be doing it.
Oh, wow.
And when her sister, because it was understood that because Sophia Dorothea was arriving, that George's mistress should leave. So her
Yes.
sister was chased out of court.
Okay.
But she eventually put another woman in George's way. So Clara arranged a mistress for George, a lady called
Wow.
Melusine von der Schulenburg.
Mm-hmm.
And she was perfect for George. She was not incredibly scintillating company. She was steady. She was a good listener. She liked to hunt. She liked to ride. And one of George's favorite things to do was moan. And he would sit for hours and moan at Melusine. And she just sat there and went, oh dear. Oh, I know. So she was the perfect match. So poor Sophia Dorothea is married to a
Yeah.
man she doesn't love, doesn't care. He is openly consorting with his mistress, who he had 3 children with.
Oh dear.
That he would dance with her in front of everybody. He took her to official events that Sophia Dorothea was not at. And
Oh.
she eventually became known as the Scarecrow Melusine because she was an incredibly tall, gaunt, thin woman.
Wow.
And we have one letter from Sophia, George's mother, where she's laughing that she was at a party and Melusine was standing behind George's chair, and she turned to someone and said, look at that tall Morkin and think of it being my son's passion.
Oh,
So it's just so. So Sophia Dorothea, bless her, yes, she's married to a man that doesn't love her, ignores her, and she feels isolated and alone. And you can see how this is going to go down.
yeah. Oh boy. Wow. It's a very complicated situation and desperately unhappy. So, ooh. Let's take a step back from this scenario, this situation, and hop back over to Stuart Britain for a moment, because a major scandal broke in the 1680s. In 1681, Elizabeth Ogle, née Percy, from the illustrious Percy family, was in an arranged marriage with the extremely wealthy yet dissolute Thomas of Longleat. In a dramatic course of events, she was pursued romantically by a Swedish count called Carl von Königsmarck, and seems to have reciprocated his affections. And their seems to have been an attempted escape to Holland to be with her lover. Now, Karl von Königsmarck, this time, who it is generally accepted um, had Finn, or however you pronounce that, I'm sorry, murdered by hiring assassins, including Colonel Vratz and others, who shot him, um, some say 5 times in the abdomen. Um, this episode proved incredibly scandalous and was the talk of the Stuart court. Now, John Evelyn, the famous Stuart diarist, he remarked in his entry of the 10th of March, 1682, which was the day that Finn's assassin, Colonel Fratz, and some of the accomplices were executed for that murder. He said, he went to execution like an undaunted hero, as one that had done a friendly office for that base coward, Count Königsmarck, who had hopes to marry the widow, the rich Lady Ogle, or Ogle, and was acquitted by a corrupt jury, and so got away. Elizabeth's dalliance with the dashing Königsmarck was at an end, and she went on to marry Charles Seymour, 6th Duke of Somerset, the following year. And the couple had no fewer than 13 children together. And so while that situation was going on, there is a connection to Sophia Dorothea here, because Karl Johann was the brother of a certain Philip von Königsmarck, who had been a childhood friend of Sophia Dorothea's and would become a lot dearer to her in the future. So who is Philip?
Philip had been a page at Celle when Sophia Dorothea was growing up. And since then, there have been a few suggestions they were childhood sweethearts, but there's nothing to suggest that. But they were good friends, so they used to play together, all that lovely stuff.
Yeah.
Philip was a bit of a soldier of fortune. Everything we read about him stresses he was dashing, he was handsome, and he famously had waist-length hair. So he had to cut it off eventually when it became a hindrance on the battlefield, but he had flowing locks so that you wouldn't know it from the vast majority of his portraits. So Philip was the grandson of a Swedish field marshal. He had impeccable military pedigree. But wherever there was work, money, and women, you could find Philip. And Philip came to Hanover because there was work, money, and women. And he was delighted to see his old friend. And for her, it was lovely to see him again, because she'd been very much sort of cut off from that lovely, celebrated, spoiled childhood and plunged into this very stuffy, etiquette-driven world. And suddenly here comes Philip, and she knows where Philip goes is parties and there's fun. And he's one of those people that seems to just brighten things up.
Right.
And also women loved him, but their husbands weren't too fond. So when he arrived, it's a marvelous moment for her, because he has a connection to that, and here's someone that she knows she can at least have a good time with.
Yeah, right. So now we're back with Sophia Dorothea again, and it didn't take long before she began to have her own enemies, especially in Countess Clara von Platen, who you mentioned earlier. And now we have a portrait of her here. So you introduced her to us already, but why was she so at odds with Sophia Dorothea?
It was an interesting thing, because Clara had a lot of power, as I say, on the fly. And she had a little ongoing niggle with Duchess Sophia. So because Sophia was very fit, despite being older than Clara, and she would make Clara, as a lady in waiting, follow her around the garden. Sophia would stride really brisk, and Clara would be in these huge gowns and thick makeup, and apparently run down her face. And Clara is someone that history remembers as a villainess. So she's been described as a bloated spider. There are stories of her bathing her syphilitic body in milk and then giving the milk to the poor to drink and things like that.
Oh.
And the reason that there were 2 reasons Clara seems to have taken against Sophia Dorothea. One of them is that Sophia Dorothea was a bit too popular. So at court,
Ah.
people liked her, and Clara was very used to being sort of queen of court, even though Sophia was officially head of court. Because Clara had a powerful husband, she had a very powerful lover in Ernest Augustus,
Mhm.
and she firstly held it against Sophia Dorothea that George's first mistress, Clara's sister, had been dismissed.
Mm.
And she wanted to be sure that Sophia Dorothea stayed in her place, and that place was to be a very quiet wife and not get in the way. And to
Right.
do that, she befriended Sophia Dorothea, and she made herself invaluable to her in a lot of ways. And Sophia Dorothea appears to have trusted her at first. That didn't last. Uh, but Clara was so open and confident in her position that when she and Duchess Sophia both had a son by Ernest Augustus in the same year, they both named their sons Ernest Augustus.
Oh.
And Clara really liked to get to know the most popular men at court, if you catch my drift. So
Mm-hmm.
Clara started an affair with Count von Königsmarck.
Okay.
But for him, it was a notch on the bedpost.
Mm.
And when he dumped her, because it was, he dumped her, Clara
Yeah,
took it very personally. And
I see.
although he didn't go straight to Sophia Dorothea, he was obviously forming a very close relationship with Sophia Dorothea. And
Mm.
that to Clara was enormously annoying. She tried to come back and he refused. It all seems like it was quite, I feel like it might have been quite embarrassing in a lot of ways as well.
Mm-hmm.
That she was sort of
Right.
chased him for a little while and he wasn't interested. And I think for the
Yes.
first time that she was sort of faced with the fact that she was very good at using men to get what she wanted. And she
Mm-hmm.
had very much been used. And I think it was a
Right.
real ego blow, as it would be.
Yeah, well, she was definitely a woman scorned then, so
Mm,
hell hath no fury and all that.
mm,
Wow. Okay. Well, so it's very personal.
mm,
Um, this this antagonism that she felt towards Sophia
mm.
Dorothea. Now, let's look at the relationship between Sophia Dorothea and Philip, how it began to blossom and grow. Could we would you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Philip was someone who, as I say, he was a connection to that earlier, much happier life. And he
Yes.
was he seems to have been very easy company. So he was about the same age, he had the same interests, they were both quite flighty. They were probably well matched in many ways. And
Mm-hmm.
we know they had a bit of a meet cute where Sophia Dorothea went to pick up her little boy in the garden and she misjudged picking him up and nearly dropped him. And he swept in and rescued the boy and carried him in. So it's one of
Oh,
those little romantic movie moments, And then
yes.
we have reports of them dancing together at a very grand ball in honor of
Mm-hmm.
George. But all
Oh.
eyes were on them. He was wearing, I think it was pink and silver silk and brocade. And
Mm-hmm.
she was wearing like a beautiful flowing effervescent white gown. And you can see here that we've already had the villainess Clara described by onlookers as a bloated spider.
Oh
And now
dear.
we have our beautiful young couple.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you read the letters between the couple that we're going to come to, he was, by our standards, very overcooked as a correspondent, but he was very much a love bomber. So he made Sophia Dorothea feel seen and wanted and beautiful again.
Mm-hmm.
And he just devoted himself to her. They weren't lovers at this point, they were just friends, but he was always
Mm-hmm.
there for her. They took walks together, they talked for hours, and she was starved of that. She had
Right.
a lady in waiting called Eleanor von dem Nesbeck, who she was very close to.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, because this was a court where there was a lot of people, like, sadly, all courts, that there was a lot of jostling for position, a lot
Mm.
of gossip, a lot of betrayal. You could advance at the cost of someone else. And as the wife, she was watched a lot, and Clara watched her constantly, reported back constantly on what she was up to.
Wow.
And there's a letter from Philip from before they were intimate, in which he says to Sophia Dorothea, think of me sometimes and believe me your slave.
Wow.
So he was devoted to her. And of course, because he would go off and fight, there was always that little thing that one day he might not come back.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
And she had that with George. We know at one point George was thought lost in battle, and Sophia Dorothea was genuinely beside herself. There were times when she thought it from Philip as well, and she was beside herself then too. And there was a point during her humiliation, George fathering children with this other woman very openly, leaving her sometimes for weeks on end to spend time with Melusine, that it became an affair. It crossed over from platonic into something else, and we absolutely know that because their letters don't hold back. And these letters that they exchanged, it developed codes in them. They referred to people by code names, code numbers. They hid them in different hiding places. Clara knew all about it because she watched everything. Clara would take the letters and read them and put them back.
Wow.
So Clara at all times is kind of puppeteering the situation. But I think beyond all of that, as it goes on, he starts to offer her the chance of escape. And it becomes later on, as we already heard with the Finn and Ogle story, there's talk of elopement.
Yes.
But interestingly, at first, George didn't believe that it was an affair. He thought it was just a bit of a fancy, a courtly love. And Clara kind of drove the nail in the coffin. George had bought beautiful embroidered gloves for Sophia Dorothea from Flanders, and there was not another pair like it. And Clara stole one of them. There was then a masked ball, so everyone is in masks. And she arranged secretly an assignation with Philip. He didn't know who the assignation was with, and we thought it was with a masked Sophia Dorothea. So they were canoodling, and Clara arranged for her husband to just happen to be walking with George in the grounds where they were canoodling. So they came upon this, and they obviously fled their separate ways, and she dropped the glove.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And the glove was one of those. Now, Sophia Dorothea obviously isn't innocent. She is having an affair. But that's not what George saw. George thought that's what he saw, but he actually saw a very carefully orchestrated plot with someone who was nothing to do with any of it, but found the glove, and the glove was all it took to sort of trip him into believing it was happening. Because everything else was kind of, well, it doesn't have to be that. It could just be silly letters, silly girls, silly young men. And then he's got the glove. Interestingly, Clara then went to Count von Königsmarck and said, I can clear all of this up. If you become my lover and marry my daughter, I can go and tell Ernest Augustus and George it's all been a horrible misunderstanding. And you can, we'll never speak of it again. And he said no. He wanted to be loyal. But at this point, he and Sophia Dorothea still don't know they've been discovered because George was brooding on it. So from this point on, they are discovered, but they don't know it. And that's when things get very dangerous.
Gosh, this Clara was so devious.
She's so devious.
Oh my.
And what's interesting with her is she sort of empire builds. So she had her sister as the lover of the son. Then she tried to engineer. She couldn't get that anymore, so she engineered a friend, Melusine, to be the lover of the son. Now, Melusine was no threat to Clara because she had no ambition. All she wanted was to have a roof over her head and be able to not have to worry about anything. So she wanted to just, be a kept woman.
Fair enough. Right.
But Clara wants power and influence. So she engineers, and it's interesting how she puppets other women. So she gets Melusine in, tries to get her daughter in, and she eventually manages to get the daughter in another way as one of George I's best friends and rumoured lover, because the daughter is actually the daughter of George's father, Ernest Augustus.
Oh, wow.
So there's whole rumours of incest that look likely to be unfounded, but Clara is constantly empire building and doing it really the only way she could as a woman in the era. She's doing it through intrigue, Doesn't excuse it, but my God, she was a schemer. She really was.
Yeah, clearly.
Mm.
Wow. Um, so things began to unravel pretty badly here.
Yeah.
What eventually happened to Philip and why?
So Philip and Sophia Dorothea began to realize, because this is where we get to the point that they were so immature and quite. When I was writing the book, there were moments when I wanted to just reach in and slap them, because Clara started reading the letters and not even bothering to hide the fact she'd read them. She didn't reseal them. They knew they were discovered.
Wow.
And they decided to elope. Obviously, this would have been an enormous embarrassment. They were going to go to Duke Anthony Ulrich, whose son she was going to marry. And it would have been an enormous embarrassment. It would have embarrassed the Holy Roman Empire. The scandal would have been enormous.
Right.
So Clara went to Ernest Augustus and said, "This is what's going to happen." And he said, "Right, you know what? Deal with it. Have him arrested. Have Philip arrested. I don't want to any part of it. Just get rid of it." So Clara sent a letter to Philip, pretending it was from Sophia Dorothea, inviting him to an assignation in Sophia Dorothea's rooms. He arrives, and immediately, of course, she said, "I didn't send that letter." Now, at this point, you and I might go, something's afoot, but they didn't. They had a little tryst. And they said, "Tomorrow morning, tomorrow at dawn, we leave, we go, it doesn't matter." Now, this is where things get a little muddy, but the sort of accepted version of events is that he left Sophia Dorothea. He was going out sort of through the servants' entrance, if you like. And he was apprehended by, as you can see in the image there, a group of armed men. That he tried to fight his way out, but was overpowered and was very badly beaten. He was then dragged into a room, and in true villainous style, who should be there but Clara? And she gave him one last chance, the old "I can make this all go away." Now, supposedly we don't know what he called her, but he called her something not very nice. And the last thing that he saw was her kick him in the head, that she kicked him in the head. And then she gave the order and had him murdered.
Oh dear.
And then you've got a problem, because that, insofar as we know what we can know, which is what Clara kind of admitted in ravings later, is that they'd overstepped the mark. So now they've got a dead man. And a dead man who is quite well liked in other courts. He's known throughout the various duchies. He's fought for other people. And he has ties. His sister is well connected, and now they've murdered him. So we don't know what happened to him. My best bet is that he was thrown over into the river and washed away. It seems like the best bet. There's been lots of discoveries. Horace Walpole, of course, that great gossip, said that he was buried under Sophia Dorothea's room. Now, how they would have done that, he doesn't seem to think. But yeah, he's completely gone. What's interesting as well is that immediately after his disappearance, I think it's 4 courtiers leave Hanover. And in the record book, we see that they were paid huge amounts of money before they left. Now, somebody murdered Count Philip von Königsmarck and probably threw him into the river. And these courtiers, who had been part of the sort of Platten faction, was suddenly paid very generously to go and never come back. So it doesn't take a genius to sort of tie those two things together.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, what a whole terrible tale. Gosh. Yeah. And I mean, there's been a long-standing mystery about what happened to his body. And there was some excitement back in 2016 when bones were discovered in Leine Palace, I think, or in Germany. And there's a National Geographic article about it. And there was a lot of speculation at the time that the bones could belong to Philip. Turns out they were the remains of 5 different people and animals. And the link to that article is available below this video on YouTube in the description box. Are we any closer to knowing, if the remains had been thrown out the window and gone out where would they eventually have gone to? I mean, is there maybe
Oh,
that's the
long
thing?
gone. Yeah,
Oh,
long, long, long gone. And it
yeah.
would be the easiest way, or there were other suggestions that they could have burned the remains and just thrown the ash into the river.
Mm,
I think there were lots of ways to get rid of a dead
mm,
lover. But
yeah.
yeah, I actually spoke to one of the people involved in the disinterment of those bones.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
before they were occupied, before they were identified, and he at the time was pretty sure that they weren't going to be anything to do with this. And he said that he knew the media would jump on that because it's
Oh,
such a juicy
oops.
story. But he said that he thought it was very unlikely. That his feeling was that they were probably like monks or something, that apparently they'd found other monkish bones in the vicinity. So no, we're no
Right.
further forward. I don't think we ever will be now. The only thing we know is that Clara, when she was dying of syphilis, would rant and rave about the ghost of Philip appearing to her, and why did I do it, that kind of thing, what's going to happen to me in the other world. That's the
Wow.
closest we have to a confession, but it's a funny
Wow.
one if she had no
It,
involvement.
yeah. Gosh. Um, according to the editor of the 1903 publication of Sophia Dorothea and Philip's letters, which we'll go into a bit later on, um, he says that the assassination of Königsmarck was as dramatic as the murder of Rizzio. So that's referring, of course, to the murder of Mary, Queen of Scots' favourite, David Rizzio, in 1566. Following Philip's gruesome end, it was Sophia Dorothea's turn to be punished. So, what happened to her, please?
She was placed immediately under house arrest. She was locked in her rooms. And she's got her bags there ready to go. So there was no
Hmm.
question she was going to go at this point.
Right.
She was repeatedly asked to swear loyalty to George, repeatedly refused. And she famously said, "If what he accuses me of is true, I am unworthy of his bed. If his
Mm-hmm.
accusation is false, he is unworthy of me."
Mm.
So as a result, there was, you can imagine the gossip at this point. The Holy Roman Empire was alive with it. This was
Yeah.
the talk of the courts. And she refused, constantly refused. She would not swear obedience. So they eventually had their marriage dissolved. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
due to adultery, because that would have been seen as hugely embarrassing and kind of unmanning for George. It would
Mm-hmm.
almost have been that he wasn't man enough for his woman. So instead, it was
Right.
because she had abandoned him.
Mm.
She had anticipated being allowed to go home to Celle, but she wasn't. It was a really cruel punishment. She was stripped of all of her titles, and she was refused any access to her children ever again. She never saw either of her children again. She did open correspondence with her daughter years later, but never saw her. And George essentially had her written out of the history of Hanover.
Oh
Children weren't
boy.
even allowed to speak of them having a mother. They weren't allowed to refer to a mother at all.
Wow.
And she
Gosh.
was sent to Alden House on Loomberg Heath. And that's
Right.
where, with her father's consent, her father thought what she did was terrible. She stayed there.
Wow.
Um, she was placed under 24-hour watch. Things loosened as the years went on, but she was always under watch. She wasn't allowed free movement. She was allowed limited distances from the house, always with someone accompanying her.
Right.
Her visitors and all of her post was read and checked. The
Gosh.
only person who was allowed unlimited access to her was her mother. And her mother stood by her. She appealed on her behalf. She tried to get her out, but nobody was having it. She became known as the Duchess of Alden, and there were lots of stories locally of this magnificent woman. There's one that I'm just going to read a little bit, which was someone who visited about 10 years later, and he said, "Local tradition amongst the peasants still hands down the picture of the mysterious great lady of the castle, always beautifully dressed, with diamonds gleaming in her dark hair, galloping the road, followed by an escort of cavalry with drawn swords."
Wow.
So she,
What a picture.
yeah, it's
Mm.
it's a phenomenal picture. And we know that she never tried to escape. There was a fire in her quarters at one point, and she waited, very obedient, to be rescued. She just had a jewel casket. A couple of occasions, there was some renovations required. Another, there was a worry that there may be an invasion. So on those occasions, she was allowed to go to Celle, but again, she was held under guard when she got there. There was that was her life. On his deathbed, her father asked if he could see her one last time, but his chief minister, who was a very ambitious man, said no, it's a terrible idea. So they died unreconciled. She had some
Wow.
administrative power. She was allowed to things like dinner parties, and she spent her entire life, what was left of it, in philanthropy and charitable works. But it was, for a woman who was very gregarious, it was a very reduced life in every sense.
I see. And here we have some images of
Mm,
Olden House.
mm,
And so this is where she had her very long imprisonment
mm,
with all those severe restrictions.
mm.
I think it was, 30 years or so,
Yeah,
something.
32 years.
32
Over
years,
half her
wow.
life, yeah.
Well,
Um,
extraordinary.
yeah, no
And
relative children. Her son, there's a legend that her son sort of fled by night and rode like the wind to Alden House and tried to swim the moat but couldn't manage to swim.
wow. Oh, that's so sad.
Sadly, it is, and sadly, she did start later in life to write to her daughter, and really sadly, that Sophia Dorothea kind of held out hopes of rescue. Instead, she introduced her to a con man, and Sophia Dorothea ended up losing a lot of money to him, and it was just a sad circumstance that, yeah, it was just really sad. And obviously, Clara died of syphilis. The key players start to die off. George
Right.
becomes the king of Great Britain. There's a
Yeah.
little kicker though, that George was always very solicitous that Sophia Dorothea was made comfortable and kept safe, because a clairvoyant or a fortune teller told him that he had to be careful, because if Sophia Dorothea died, he wouldn't survive a year. And George was a man who believed in omen. So whatever
Right.
else happened to Sophia Dorothea, she had to be comfortable, healthy, and cared for, because when she died, the clock begins ticking for George.
Yes. And
She
so
did
this is the
die.
apartment. Yeah.
That's the
So,
apartment, and that's
yeah.
where she lived and died.
Right.
Just about 32, 33 years after she was in prison, she died there. There's
Incredible.
an interesting story that Melusine over in England,
Hmm.
sleeping at George's side, suddenly
Right.
bolts awake at pretty much the moment of Sophia Dorothea's death, and tells George that Sophia Dorothea's spirit has just visited her and told her that she had died and that he will be dead within 12 months.
Wow.
And the kind of coda to the story is George is dead within 12 months, which
Wow.
is
That's creepy.
it is, and it's an
Wow.
interesting little story that there's a, I don't know how true this is, but there's several versions of George's death, but one of them has that at a crossroads in Germany, or 2 days before he died, a man clad in black handed him a letter through the window that told him that that his wife's last words were cursing his name, and that he would die within the week, and that he did die. I think that's a bit of one of those stories that George has loved.
Yeah.
So that's one of those man in black at crossroads. But I actually wonder if George spent a year just fretting and worrying, or spent the months fretting and worrying, and almost worried himself to death.
I suppose that could,
Who
exacerbate
knows?
an already existing health condition, perhaps.
Yeah, well, George had quite a lot of health conditions.
Yeah. Wow. We previously mentioned the love letters between Sophia Dorothea and Philip. There is quite a lot of, a lot of stories, many stories to do with that, of course. Because according to the preface by W.H. Wilkins in the 1903 publication of those letters, there were many between the couple, and they were preserved at the library of Lund, and also in Berlin. Could you tell us about that, please? Those letters.
Yes,
They
there
were
were
able to survive.
hundreds of letters, and they numbered them, which is quite helpful.
Yeah.
We know there are a lot less missing, because one's missing from the numbers. But Philip entrusted the letters to a brother-in-law, and he held on to them until he tried to sell them back to the House of Hanover. So it was kind of, like in the modern era when people go to the paper, or they might go to someone and say, I've got these letters that are going to ruin this celebrity.
Right.
He tried to sell them back, but the price was too high, basically. They refused to pay.
Right.
So eventually he just entrusted them to the university in London. Some were published. They were very heavily edited and very selectively published. Because even amongst those that were published, there's some quite explicit material. And
Oh.
it's thought quite likely that a lot of the more explicit material was got rid of because it's not quite the core love image. You don't really want to think about your loved ones sending these kinds of letters back and forward. But there's some really funny stuff in them. So there's one where Philip tells Sophia Dorothea that he's trained a bear to kill him. So if she ever breaks his heart, he'll just ask the bear to rip his heart out of his chest.
Oh dear. Wow.
I recommend anyone reads them that gets a chance, because some of them are incredibly overcooked, but there's also, you genuinely do get the sense of, you want it to work out, even though you're not going to. They obviously adored each other. I don't think it would have gone the long distance, though. It was a bit too raging inferno of passion.
Right.
How can we be together? Oh, war is threatening us. My husband is threatening us. And I think when you kind of have to just live together and do the dishes, that doesn't necessarily translate.
True.
But yeah, they're fascinating letters, and
Yes.
quite an unusual insight into. Let's put it this way: George's first letters don't read anything like as passionately as these.
Right. And our viewers and listeners can read those letters because there is a link to them, and you could read them all, and that from that 1903 publication. So yeah, really, really lovely stuff in there too. And next, of course, there was a film, a classic film in 1948 based on this. Sarabande for Dead Lovers, starring Stuart Grange and Joan Greenwood. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. I've seen it a couple of times, and
Yeah.
it's fantastic. It's great fun. It's an Ealing film, so you may know Ealing Comedy is more famous for. I think it was Ealing's first colour film, and it is sumptuous. If you like costume, if you like romance, if you love, I suspect you would love it if you love a lot of production design. There's a lot of money on the screen, and it looks marvelous. And Stuart Granger is perfect.
Oh yes.
He's just the right mix of, you just kind of want to muss up his hair a bit sometimes. He's so perfect. Interestingly, Marlene Dietrich was approached to play Clara, but she got confused and thought they'd approached Sophia Dorothea, and she didn't want the part, so she turned it down. But Flora Robson plays Clara, and to be fair, she is perfect. She is pure vitriol as Clara. I recommend anyone see it. It's a beautiful film. Like it's a fun film, but it is aesthetically a beautiful film.
Yeah, I think it's sad how few people have watched it, and there are some people who dismiss it, and I don't think that that's warranted, because it is a beautiful film, and I think done very well. So yeah, you can find that online. It's been released recently, I think, restored, and so it's very beautiful, definitely. But yeah, quite sad, quite sad, really. And that reminds me of another film, A Royal Scandal, which is based on another really tragic love story, story between the Danish Queen Caroline Matilda and the court physician Struensee. Have you seen that one?
I have. We saw it at the cinema, and we were the only people in the screening. But yes.
Well, that's good, because if I did that, I was blubbing at the end.
It's wonderful, isn't it? It is, and again, if that's a story that's outside of your era, but that's a story that if people love a doomed romance, then there's one for you right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, but what were your biggest takeaways from your research on this book?
There's one thing I was thinking about this quite a lot, and there was a quote from Sophia Dorothea that I thought I wanted to use. In a letter, she wrote, "My only pleasure is to make you remember me," and it was that. It's that people don't know who she is, and that makes me really sad, because that's what George wanted. The one thing he wanted was George to be Sophia Dorothea to be forgotten, and she made some naive and poor decisions on a number of levels, but she is part of our history. She's part of Stuart history, she's part of Georgian history, and I always think it's quite nice when somebody has tried to be eradicated from history and then they come back. So it's hopefully helping her with her wish. My only pleasure is to make you remember me.
That's lovely, and you've certainly done that. You've with your amazing book, um, and I have the. This is
There it
the.
is.
Yep,
Thank you.
and it's a beautiful book, and I urge you all to read it and learn about this purposefully forgotten woman's story.
Mm.
Um, it, it's it's quite a memorable tale, definitely. Right. Well, I thank you so much for that, but I have a few little extras here, if you don't mind. Um, I'd love to know what first got you started in history. What first piqued your interest?
This is a story I've told a few times, so forgive me if you've heard it before. When I was very small, my granddad was an amazing storyteller, and he would tell us stories about. He lived in the middle of nowhere. He'd tell us stories about Dick Turpin, Robin Hood. We lived on the edge of Sherwood
Mhm.
Forest. And then one day he told me when I
Yay!
was about 5, yes, exactly. He told me about Marie Antoinette. And
Wow.
from that moment on, I was obsessed with Marie Antoinette. So I think it started there. And I remember drawing a picture, this is a bit of like a beautiful ball gown. I was about 6 years old and no head. And
Oh,
now, obviously, you would sort of call in the psychologist, but my parents said, "Oh, yeah, great." And then obviously said to my granddad, "Can you tell us a more family friendly story?" So it was that. And my family, it's always been, I was always encouraged with history and reading.
mhm.
We were always surrounded by books. My mum and dad are both history buffs, and I say my grandparents. And it was that. So it started before I can even remember. Obviously, where you live as well. I grew up in
Mhm.
Nottinghamshire, so you grow up
Yeah.
steeped in it. You know, it's
Mhm.
Robin Hood, and so that's what
Yeah.
piqued my interest from a very young age. And I'm so lucky now because, as you do, we get to make our living through history.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so you pretty well, when did you know you wanted to be a historian, professionally?
It was little by little, and I used to sort of tell my husband interesting tidbits of the 18th century. And I think one day he
Mhm.
said, "Oh, this is all really interesting, but why don't you just put it on the internet?" So I
Mhm.
started a website, and I never really thought of becoming more than just a website of the 18th century.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was contacted by Pen and Sword for my first book, Life in the Georgian Court, and that's when it became because I wanted to be a writer for a long time, but as you do, you go into other jobs, and that becomes something. How does one become a writer or historian?
Yeah.
And I was very lucky because I was able to, through Life in the Georgian Court and subsequent work, I was able to do this as a living. And it was very much something that was something I would have loved to have done. But as I say, it was something that you think that's always going to be a hobby, obviously, because how can it be more? And
Right.
it was through, as you'll know, a lot of hard work and also some luck that the luck right people see things at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate.
Great. Thank you. And do you have any advice for anyone in our audience who is thinking about doing the same thing? You know,
Just
yeah.
throw yourself in. If you have a passion, Andrea's passion was just for Stuart era, mine is for the Georgians.
Hmm.
You can just throw yourself into it and read primary sources, read secondary sources, absorb everything, just immerse yourself in that world, and those characters will start to talk to you, and you there's that moment of connection that I'm sure you've experienced when
Yeah.
you're not just reading about it, you're almost there, and
Yes.
you get to see the interplays and understand it. And just, yeah, I mean, if it's your passion, just love it and cherish it and nurture it. And if you have children, nurture it in them as well, because we always need historians. We need historians forever, so please just keep nurturing that.
Yes. I agree. Thank you. That's lovely advice. Um, and do you have a favorite archive?
I do. It's the Georgian Papers program by the Royal Collection Trust. I just
Hmm.
love it. I can sit for hours and hours and hours and just read Queen Charlotte's letters telling off her children, and her children telling her, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it," and her awful son embarrassing her, and then various kings telling their awful sons not to embarrass them. It's fantastic. It's such an insight into not the public face of it and not the people in the portrait, but the people. And
Hmm.
I love it. And it's a fantastic team there as well. They're just doing fantastic work.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay, this is my favorite part, where I ask my guests to talk about a Stuart fantasy dinner party. Who would you invite? What would you serve? And who would you sit next to?
So I have narrowed down to three people for this, and
Hmm.
they're all women. It's an all lady party. I
Oh,
wanted
wow.
two two takes on royal men. So I've gone for Sophia, our
Hmm.
Electress Sophia,
Yeah.
because I just think she comes across in her memoirs. I just want to sit down and talk to the woman. But she's so not modern in the worst way, but she comes across in a way you could imagine just sitting and chatting to her.
Right.
And I just want to ask her, what was it like being a mother to this absolute big-headed boy? What was it like? How do you feel that you missed out on being the queen by a few weeks? My second one, because I want someone from the alternate, a similar experience from the other side. I thought I'd go for the classic Nell Gwynn.
Oh,
Bit of a
yay.
yeah. I'm sure
Yes.
she's been invited many times, but
Well,
she was
she's very popular. Yeah.
yeah, she was all well. She was one of my granddad's favorite stories as well, the oranges. So I feel like I'm
Oh,
kind of
lovely.
honouring that. And also a lady called Alice Thornton,
Hmm. Oh,
who
yes.
was a yeah, you'll know Alice. Of course, you'll know.
Yes. And we had Dr. Cordelia
Yes,
Beatty on your
yes.
show talking
So
about her.
you
Yes.
know her very well. That's
Yes.
where I was so
Yes.
happy to see that because I was reading her paper, her books online. So Alice
Yeah.
was a Yorkshire woman, very
Yeah.
royalist Yorkshire woman, and you'll know, of course, and your viewers will know, that
Mhm.
she went through life from the very top to the very bottom and wrote it all down.
Yeah.
So one of the best insights into everyday life
Yeah.
in
It's
the Stuart North.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So I'd
I
like to sit
learned so
next to
much.
Alice
Yeah. Oh,
because
that's great.
then you get
Well,
Sophia and Nell sat next to one another.
oh, that's fun. That sounds like it would
And
be
I would,
very
sorry,
entertaining and enlightening at the same time.
but on the menu, I'm going to be very traditional. I thought, you know what, let's go with a gorgeous full roast beef dinner.
Oh, nice.
You know, we're in Yorkshire. We've got Alice from Yorkshire, lovely Yorkshire puddings, hearty fare,
Yeah.
something to really tuck into while we tuck into the gossip as well.
Yes. With a nice thick gravy, perhaps.
Yes, 100%. Mm.
Yes. Wow. Sounds great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having
Thank you.
you on the show today. And yeah, it's an extraordinary book that you've made, many books you've made now, but about Sophia Dorothea, and I commend you for all of your wonderful work and for doing such an important part in bringing these histories to so many more people. So
Thank
thank you.
you. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. Take care. Well, Catherine Curzon has written and published extensively on Georgian history, including Life in the Georgian Court, which you see there. And I also have a copy of that right here as well. It's a lovely hardback that I have here. Um, But she's also written Mistresses of George the First and Second and the Kings of Georgian Britain, among many others. And she is also one half of the writing team behind Ellie Curzon's fiction works, which have been hugely popular and best-selling. So she's done wonderfully well, and it's been a joy to see her succeed in so many things. I'd like to give thanks to our director and producer, Gavin of Orland Media, and thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll join me again next month when I welcome historian Beverly Adams, who will talk with me about Elizabeth Stuart, the Winter Queen, the subject of her newly released biography, The Winter Queen and Her Legacy, The Children of Elizabeth Stuart. Until then, don't forget to keep it Stuart.